Well, welcome, Faith family. It is great to have you join us today. Thando, it is going to be an incredible time, and I know that each and every single one of our partners and viewers is connecting with us on this beautiful day.
Yes, and as you said, it is going to be incredible. Today we are joined by someone who is no stranger to the network, but I know so many of you at home have been asking, when are we going to have this person more in front of the scenes, or rather, in front of the camera on your TV screens? And now the time is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. We have just concluded something that's absolutely special, and it is loading. Are you ready to tell us about that?
I just want to first honor each and every single one of our partners.
Yes.
I want to thank each and every single one of you. So on behalf of all of our partners, you know what I mean? And of course, as our team being with Dr. Andre and Pastor Jenny, the entire crew, the entire partnership base, we have finally heard the cry of the people. The people have been saying, we need to hear, there are certain pressing matters that we need to discuss.
And there is a sound coming from Africa.
Exactly. There is a sound coming from Africa, and it is not a specific race of whether it's black or white. In Xhosa will say whether it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So there's a sound. There's something that's happening. So I want to thank each and every single one of you, and on behalf of Dr. Andre and Jenny, just want to honor each and every one of you for speaking and voicing it out, because today we had the honor and privilege of spending time with Pastor Afrika Mhlophe, recording his new show, Pressing Matters, which will come out to you later within the year, around the month of October, November, those times. So, Pastor Afrika, after that introduction, welcome to Behind the Faith. Now, I need to actually say, Pastor Afrika, we're actually sitting on your set of Pressing Matters doing a Behind the Faith show.
Yeah, I can see that. As a matter of fact, I wasn't sure you're introducing me or the continent or some other thing. So I was getting the flow of it. So yes, it's a privilege for me to be here and for us to have concluded this program called Pressing Matters, which we have discussed that we will shoot, and finally I'm able to live up to that expectation and the people's expectations of us and request that we should shoot this program. And so it's now concluded and being packaged and ready to be flighted. Yeah. It's time to be announced. Yeah.
So, Pastor Afrika, let's jump straight into this. Before we actually get into it, because maybe someone's watching there and they have no idea who Afrika Mhlophe is. If you don't know what Africa is or know Africa is, this is not the continent of Africa. This is the pastor from Africa. But if someone doesn't know who you are, give us a brief synopsis background, just like who you are, where you're from, that kind of stuff.
Well, I respond to the name Africa when, that's the name I was given. But I'm more than that, obviously. Names have very little help in helping us understand who a person is. It's what a person represents that really tells us who a person is.
Yeah.
So I believe that God has raised me up at this time in this nation of South Africa and to be a voice. Like John speaks about being a voice crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord. So I'm a preacher of the gospel. I've been for the last 20 years. In fact, this is my 20th year in ministry. I began in 1998. And so I'm married. I've got 2 children. My son is turning 9, end of October. My daughter is turning 6, end of May. And I lead a church in Port Elizabeth called Good News Community Church. I'm an author. I've spoken to meetings at Mighty Man conferences around the country. I've had the privilege of traveling to most parts of South Africa and some parts of other countries of the world,
Well, Pastor Afrika, let's jump straight into this whole thing, right? So we're talking Pressing Matters.
Yeah.
Now, we just finished recording 12 episodes over a 3-day period of the program Pressing Matters, covering topics like culture, identity, church, politics, faith, morality, inequality and prejudice, or if I could put it like this, racial polarization. Yeah. So talk to us a bit more about these topics and why these topics and on this program.
Yeah. So I think that these are things that dominate the conversation levels in South Africa. Those of you watching from other parts of the world, we are a developing country. We obtained freedom where the majority of people called black can vote in South Africa in 1994. And we've lived under the space where there was racial segregation. We are defined by racial segregation and apartheid. And so there's developmental issues and conversations around development, shared resources, education access, health access, that are shared is still a work in progress. And so all of these things either cause us to constantly come into conflict with each other, whether it's access to university education or something or the other. But the church, often we find ourselves without answers to these things, where the world seems to be the one that's dominating the whole system as to what happens with racism, what happens with inequality, what happens with culture and identity. But I believe God's word has answers to all issues.
Yeah.
We need to search it, read it, interpret it, preach it, teach it, live it, assimilate it. So in this program, we've been looking at issues like that, which are looking at about culture and identity, and discuss about, as you know, I've written a book called Freed by God, but Imprisoned by Culture. And we've been looking at what exactly is culture. A lot of people do things based on what they call culture. And they would say that this is who I am. And culture is defined to us as a way of life. And I often ask the question, a way of life according to who? In other words, who determines that as a way of life, as your culture? So my conclusion is that culture is you and I being governed by dead people. It's being ruled by dead people. Because you don't start culture, you only follow culture. And so, but culture is so powerful. And there's nobody that's not influenced by culture. Everyone lives within a space called culture. And therefore, it forms identity. And so identity is very, very important. And I say that in identity, a product is defined by the one who makes it, not by the one who discovers it.
Yeah.
God makes man in his image. He doesn't define the man as black or white. He defines him as man. And he, being the maker of a product, has a right to name what he's making. He never named it as black or white. People call it black or white. And within that, they have their own expectations of what is white or what is black. So as human beings, we need to know these things. And therefore, what happens when we address an issue of racial polarization or inequality or prejudice or anything basically, we address it informed by the values that dominate our hearts.
Yeah.
So the problem that we encounter is not responsible for our values. The problem we encounter reveals our values. So when we have a problem with somebody cutting you in traffic, it's not the person that causes you to curse or to use some expletive. It's not as responsible. It is that person is responsible to provoking what was already inside of you. Like a tube. If you have a tube of toothpaste, hopefully everybody does. Hopefully everybody brushes their teeth in the morning. When you press the tube and what's inside the tube comes out. So the one who presses the tube is not responsible for the contents of the tube, is responsible only for exposing the contents of the tube. So our values as Christians are very, very important. So when we talk about faith and morality, what is your moral base? What is your morality based on? Is it relative or absolute? What is your ethics based on? Are they situational, circumstantial, or do they come from God? So all those questions we're talking about here on this set.
Sure. Wow. You know, Pastor Afrika, you've touched on a number of things. Now, I'm just thinking about what's happening globally, right? Not just here in South Africa. Okay, here in South Africa, there's obviously the land issue.
Yes.
There's the racial issues that we see going around social media.
Yeah.
But then we also see the racial issues globally, of course, and the driving force with what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening in the United States of America, what's happening in Europe, immigration, the current political situation in America, all those types of things. So when we discuss these things, as much as we're speaking from as Africans, things that are affecting us here, these are things that are global.
They're global things, yeah, definitely. They go all over the world. And they're all informed by the same kind of thing. Most of the things we're referring to, whether it's discrimination against people based on their religion or based on their gender or their race, they're based on fear. So the basis of all prejudice is fear. Is fear and ignorance. There's two things, fear and ignorance, are at the source of what feeds racism, what feeds prejudice. So what we therefore need to do in addressing these issues is to deal with fear and ignorance, where people see others. And when we other people, we're othering people. So when somebody for instance, if you as a person primarily see yourself as a black person, then anybody else who's different from you you see them primarily as a white person. So however you see yourself primarily determines how you relate to the other person. The other person becomes the other rather than the brother. So you other that person. So that person of that religion is the other person. That person of that gender is the other person. He's not a person who's my brother. So we need to therefore be careful of creating unnecessary distinctions and divisions among us that are superficial. We are a human race. with different ethnicities. There are no races in the world. There's a human race with different ethnic group within that race. And we as a race are made in God's image to fulfill a divine purpose. We're not called here, and we're fighting over resources, most of it. Most of it revolves around resources. While the mindset of scarcity of resources, which is based on ignorance. So we come into a space where we believe resources are scarce. And therefore we have to compete for what we think is scarce resources. What is scarce, what we have is a poverty of mindset. It's a poverty of thinking. Poverty of ideas. We don't have scarce resources because we have a poor mindset. Resources are in abundance. We just don't know how to unearth them. So what we reveal is our ignorance. Some people will say, these immigrants have come to take over our jobs. These people coming here have come to take over our jobs. And you realize what those people are doing is things you are not doing. It's things that nobody was thinking of doing. So they're not taking your jobs. They're just coming to reveal your ignorance. That you can actually live opening that business, running that shop, doing this. So you're actually jealous because the people reveal how ignorant you were the whole time. You did not see what was around you. All the time you did not see that the ocean is a source of energy. So you blame the person who came in and used the energy for the source. That person, all the time you come from Port Elizabeth, you have not seen that this wind, we call it wind city, is a source of energy if you put on the wind turbines to have the turbines generate energy. Now this wind you've been complaining about that is always blowing us up, you did not see that it's a source of energy. So the person who does use the wind to generate energy, you see him as an enemy. Yeah. When the person actually reveals how ignorant, how poor you are in terms of... So it's actually ignorance, it's fear, it's a poverty of mindset, a poverty of ideas.
Wow.
Well, you know what? The people who are watching at home, so if there's someone who's watching at home and is saying, listen, I hear what you're saying and I really would love to be part of the solution. You know, I would love to be part of reconciling and really getting the message of the kingdom out there practically as well. And we know, of course, there are a lot of people who do watch Christian television all day. But how important is it to really engage beyond just reading the Bible, but practicalizing? And what can I do as the viewer who's watching at home to start the process?
Yeah, so I think the first place to start is to be convinced, first of all, that we have been given the ministry of reconciliation. So ministry is a lifetime service. So if you understand yourself as a minister, not just as a social activist or a charity person, because what we do in the name of charity, we're running out of energy of that. Because we're driven by what we think is philanthropy or some altruistic motive. And eventually the grace of God doesn't sustain that. You're running out of strength and energy. We need to see ourselves as ministers of the gospel, ministers of reconciliation, that we've been given, that this thing is not an opt-in, opt-out. It's not so much that, okay, I'd like to get involved in reconciliation. No, it's a ministry of reconciliation for all members of the church. It's not for some. So before we're talking about what can you do, you must be convinced you're not doing God a favor, number one. You're not doing society a favor. Okay, let me try and reconcile. No, you have to if you represent Christ. That's very important. Now, obviously, having been informed or having been convinced that this is a necessary ministry for me, a child of God, I cannot be involved in racial fracture. I have to be involved in mending. Blessed are the peacemakers, it says. Blessed are the peacemakers.
Come on.
And so if you want blessing, you'll be a peacemaker. If you don't want blessing, you won't be a peacemaker. You'll be a conflict. So it's either in life, either you're building walls or creating bridges. So either you're creating walls of partition or creating bridges of understanding. And believers have to be building bridges, not building walls. So the ministry of reconciliation, being a peacemaker, is what Christ expects of all of us. Of course, it works out different from place to place. Other people have to reconcile different religions or different racial group or different classes and gender. And so God will give us wisdom, because every country, every society will have to use different tools, because the conflict is not the same. Although the basis of the conflict is similar, as fear and ignorance, but the tools to use are different. But for me, the conviction must be that this is my calling. Where there's conflict, I must bring peace. I cannot fuel conflict and be a child of God. I must come in there and bring peace where there's conflict. And so that's my responsibility, and it's what is expected of. I get sad then when Christians are at the source of conflict, or reveling or enjoying conflict or adding to the flames and making things worse. I know that they don't read the Bible correctly. when they
Or
do so.
pretending it doesn't exist.
Or pretend as if, and they think about, sometimes we live a life, unfortunately, I call it Christian atheism. We live a life with an abstract reality of God existing in our minds, where in reality, we live as if it doesn't exist.
Sure.
So on a Sunday, we go and say, God is God, Jesus is Lord. But on a Monday, another Lord takes over our lives. The Lord of anger, the Lord of racism, the Lord of revenge, and instead of the Lord of reconciliation. So the question is, to me, I would say, which God governs you on Monday?
Sure.
Not which God you serve on Sunday. Which God do you serve on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? So people serve another God on the week. On Sunday, they serve another God.
Sure.
And so there's a conflict of values.
Sure. You know, Pastor Afrika, you touched on this a few times. You spoke about segregation. You spoke about all these different things in the reconciliation. And I want to touch on this because I know it's something you deal on in the program. So just give people a taste. But let's talk for a few moments, just for a few minutes, about the segregated church.
Yes.
Because now all of a sudden you find that there's we call it the church, which is supposed to be in unity, but there's factions, if I can put it like that. I'm not talking denominational.
Yeah.
I'm talking, you might find within the denominations
Yes.
that there's segregation even there. Let's talk about that for a few moments.
Well, people, birds of the same feathers flock together. So it depends if we see, we see the people of the same skin color as the birds of the same feathers, or we see everybody as birds of the same feather. So the question is, where do we want to draw the distinction?
Okay.
In reality, there's only two types of people on the earth: people of the light and people of darkness. Believers and unbelievers. The issue of black, white, colored is not. It's foolishness. God only can recognize His people and those who are not His people. Those who are going to be His people, those who are in the process of becoming His people. Because there are some of His people now, but in a short while they will be His people. Because they just need to be rich with the gospel. And so, because God wants everyone to be His people, So now when we come and we build churches around race, we've got a Hispanic church, we've got an Asian church, we've got an African church, we've got a white church, and European church. And it's because we want to serve our own personal interests. We want comfort. We want people to titilize us. We want something that speaks to us the way we like to be spoken to.
Sure.
And often we come into a place of comfort. Imagine if Paul and others had remained in Jerusalem. In fact, they did until God brought persecution. They were in Jerusalem, not going to preach the gospel, enjoying themselves, having a good time. And then God allowed persecution to come and drive them out. So when Paul was named Saul, came and was leading the persecution of the church, the Inquisition, they then were provoked by persecution. That's why Philip went to Samaria. All of Samaria heard the gospel. When Jesus says, when you receive the Holy Spirit, you shall receive power to be witness unto me in Jerusalem, in Samaria. And they were not going to Samaria until persecution drove them there.
Sure.
Be careful of letting persecution drive you to do what God asks you to do. Do it voluntarily. They say every knee will bow. It's a matter of time, not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's better to bow now voluntarily because you're going to bow down anyway. So there should not be churches that are white church, black church. So most of the church in South Africa, those churches that are called, or those congregations, or those gatherings, some of them might be multiracial, but very few of them are multicultural. And the difference between multiracialism and multiculturalism. Multiculturalism speaks to every cultural expression being allowed space in the church, not just one. So there's multiracial churches that practice cultural fascism, or the dominance of one culture. So other cultures are there, but they don't see expression on the platform. They only see one culture given space, because that culture is seen to be the leading culture. That culture is seen to be the culture that knows everything that's right in terms of speaking, articulation, homiletics, how to preach, time management, administration, proper worship. That culture seems to know everything. The others are simply audience or spectators. We don't mind receiving their offerings. We're not sure if they come and speak what they want to say. We are happy to have them there to validate ourselves as multiracial, but we're not sure if they should speak. And so we have that, unfortunately.
Sure.
That's why for me, interestingly enough, the first time I preached and spoken to a European audience or people of European descent, what we call white people in South Africa, was in Europe, not in South Africa. And they asked me a question. They said to me, I said to them, oh, wow, it's the first time for me to preach to white people. They laughed. I said, yes, in my country, that doesn't happen. I said, why? I said, it's not because I don't know the theology, know the Bible. It's because of this. So there's a suspicion that from the way I look, that I mustn't, surely there must be somewhere of the Bible I don't know about. And I've had people teaching me the Bible, ordinary believers in churches, young or old, mama, nice, coming to me and teaching me, you must. One lady said to me one day, and was showing me the movie The Passion of the Christ when it just came out, and he asked me to come into a house, beautiful house in a beachfront area, and we come and watch the movie. She said to me, come and see what they did to Christ and go and teach your people. So I also sat there. I mean, The Passion of the Christ is quite a long movie. I think it's over 2 hours. So I sat there for 2 hours watching what they did to Christ so that I can go and teach my people. So I sat there and I was like, wow, that's amazing. But I had to understand where it comes from. And so that's the key thing. The keys to the prison, every person who walks in racial prejudice is a prisoner to culture. But the keys to his prison do not lie with him, but they lie with the victim.
Sure.
So as I'm victimized because of the color of the skin, I'm also the one with the keys to unlock the prison door of the one who's victimizing me. Because that's what Mandela did, by the way. He was in jail, but he's the one with the freedom for his jailers. Because how he treated them made them see him different as a human being. And they were free from the emotional baggage by the prisoner that they had behind the gates because of the way he was treating them.
Sure.
That is incredible. That is absolutely powerful. I just want to shift gears quickly because we obviously time's not always on our side, but you have written 2 incredible books, Christianity and the Veneration of Ancestors, as well as Freed by God and Imprisoned by Culture.
Yes.
So now there's a new baby coming up. Not natural baby, not a human baby, but there's a new book coming out. Please tell us about that.
This one is called A Passion for Positions.
Okay.
A passion for positions.
All right.
Okay.
So it talks about pitfalls and problems caused by positional leaders.
Okay.
So it's going to be everywhere in the country in terms of bookstores, and that's what I'm happy with that. So I deal with positional leadership. I debunk the myth that to be a leader you need a title. As a leader you need a position. I debunk that. I use Christ as a model of leadership. Whoever desires to be great among you, let him be a servant of them all. And so there are 2 disciples of Jesus who came with them through their mother, the sons of Zebedee. They asked their mother to speak to Jesus so they may sit on the left and on the right. So Jesus did something quite amazing there. And other disciples were offended when they heard this. They're like, how dare you say that? And Jesus, the Bible says he called them aside. And then the Berean Bible translation, others says he called them to himself. So believers everywhere have been called aside to a new values, to a new way of system. So he called them aside and he says, listen, guys, in the world out there, he who is great amongst them is the one who shows it off, and in the pagan world. But in this world, in my kingdom, it shall not be so. In my kingdom, whoever desires to be great among you, let him be the servant of the world. So he turned it around. So the leadership in the Christian church is different. It's countercultural. It's contrary to the world. In the kingdom of the world, the system, you announce yourself as a leader. In the kingdom of God, people discover the leader.
Sure.
He doesn't announce himself. Jesus, when he met a woman at the well, he gave a prophetic word, a word of knowledge, prophesied to her concerning her lifestyle, which was true. The woman said to her, say, I perceive you're a prophet. Jesus did not confirm or deny that part as a prophet. He simply said to her, you shall worship the Father in spirit and truth. And the woman said to her later on, so we know that the Messiah is coming. And when Jesus said to her, the one you're speaking to is he. So Jesus showed ambivalence to the idea of being a prophet, but he was at liberty to confirm that he's a Messiah, because he was more concerned about saving his soul than promoting himself as a prophet.
Wow.
Sure.
So we should be running away from self-promotion and promote the mission of Christ to save humanity instead of promoting our ministries. Jesus did not die to give us ministries. He died to save lost humanity.
Sure. Well, Pastor Afrika, we are like literally fresh out of time, and it's been an incredible session, and obviously you've had opportunity to speak to a lot of students and get some engaging questions. But quickly in closing, literally 1 minute to 30 seconds to a minute, what would you say if you had an opportunity? If someone said, I'm giving you 1 minute to speak life or to speak to some people out there, to encourage them in this call of ministry. I'm not talking full-time. I'm not talking about pastoral ministry. I'm talking the call. What would you say? The call of ministry, yes.
Yeah.
What would you say to them in literally? What would be your elevator pitch, if I can put it like that, to them?
Yeah, so we have Samuel in the Bible, 1 Samuel chapter 3, a young man who hears the prophetic word of God, and he responds by going to Eli. And he goes to Eli 3 times. He's called me. Eli said, I didn't call you. But Eli said to him then, okay, I think God is speaking to this young man. Lie down, and when he speaks, say, your servant is listening. So I would say to any young person, lie down long enough to hear the voice of God.
Wow.
So God is speaking to you, but do not rush to go. Lie down long enough to hear what he says. It's one thing to be called, it's another thing to be sent. Everyone is called, not everyone is sent. Many are called, but few are chosen. When you are sent with instructions. You know you are sent when you've got a message that is unique. When you regurgitate what everybody else is saying, you are simply occupying space. So you're called. When somebody is calling you, a child, I call my child, I call them to me. There's my response to me first to hear what I'm calling them for. They can't run away from me and says, I've sent them. I've not sent them. I've simply called them. So I call them, then I send them.
Sure.
So God calls us. We don't respond to him. We run away to do what we think he wants us to do without hearing what exactly he's telling us to do. And then we do everything else everybody else is doing because we do not hear what God is telling us to do.
Sure. Well, Pastor Afrika, I'm done. I'm done. I'm like, that's it. That's just, completely messed up. Thando, Pastor Afrika, first things first, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing, for being obedient, to put it in your
And
words.
listening long enough.
Yeah, thank you for lying down long enough.
To hear the voice of
Yeah,
God.
to hear the voice of God. Thank you very much. And I know that your program will be airing right here on the Faith family of networks. And those details will come soon as to when we'll be airing. Thando, what an incredible time we've had.
It's been incredible, and to everybody, you can expect that book in November 2018. It is going to be incredible. Get yourself a copy and allow God to really, really minister something incredible in your life and a particular message that is from the heartbeat of God. So yeah.
Well, partners, family, friends, each and every single one of you connecting with us right now. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for connecting with us on another Behind the Faith. This was absolutely exciting and amazing. Listen, next week we are in Durban for the Harvest Durban event, so catch us there. We'll be live with you on Wednesday from 7 until 8:30 on behalf of Dr. Andre and Pastor Jenny Raybert. God bless you. Shalom.
Beyond Adventure offers